Be warned, readers, this video may contain spoilers for the content included. Now that you have been fairly warned, let's begin today's retrospective. Welcome, readers, to a series of unfortunate events, The Reptile Room, by Daniel Handler, aka Lemony Snicket. In Chapter 1, we are reminded of the unfortunate events that took place in the last book, as Violet, Klaus, and Sunny Baudelaire take a drive down Lousy Lane. The lane is named as such due to the area it runs through. The fields are sickly gray, trees produce sour apples, and a mostly muddy river called the Grim River. Grim River also encircles a horseradish factory, so the entire area smells bitter and strong. The poor Baudelaire orphans lost their parents in a horrible fire. After escaping from their distant relative Count Olaf and his devious plan to steal their fortune, they are now on their way to their next home. Mr. Poe, a family friend that always has a cough, is a banker in charge of their fortune and where they will be living. He decided it would be best to go out into the country to get away from the unpleasantness that happened in the city with Count Olaf. The Count tried to marry Violet in order to take hold of their enormous fortune himself. Violet is 14 and the oldest Baudelaire. She is also a brilliant inventor. Klaus, who is 12 years old, discovered the Count's plan by reading through law books. He loves to read. And poor baby Sunny was held hostage during the whole ordeal. She doesn't speak much but gibberish, although she does have quite the bite. Their next relative is Dr. Montgomery Montgomery, a traveler and scientist who happens to be their father's cousin's wife's brother. Very distant relative. However, he is the closest to the Baudelaire's location-wise. Mr. Poe and the children finally made it to Dr. Montgomery's enormous house. His house consisted of columns, lights that looked like torches, rows of square windows, and a well-kept lawn that had shrubs in the shapes of snakes. Each hedge was a different snake, some with open mouths bearing teeth. This led the children to be a little hesitant in walking up to the house. Mr. Poe rang the incredibly loud doorbell, and the children had a brief moment to think before their new guardian answered the door. They wondered if Montgomery would be better or worse than Count Olaf. Finally, the door inches open. With bated breath, the children peer in, taking in their surroundings. The house seemed pleasant, with burgundy carpet, stained glass light fixtures, and oil paintings. However, Dr. Montgomery was nowhere to be seen. All of a sudden, a short, chubby man stepped out behind the door and greeted them as their Uncle Monty, and he even made coconut cream cake. As any sequel in a series, Chapter 1 starts off with a recap and a reintroduction to our main characters. Which might be annoying to some, but it is vital to make sure everyone is in the know. Maybe it's been a long time since you read the first book, or maybe you never read the previous book. Why would anyone skip a book, especially the first one? Well, I actually did that. This is the first book in the series that I read. In elementary school, my teacher only had the second and third book. I really didn't want to start off the series with the second, but I'm glad I started it at all. And luckily, most authors have the foresight to include a summary of what happened last time, so I at least had an idea of what was going on. Speaking of what happened last time, when we first met Count Olaf, it was the most dark and disappointing for the children. They thought that they would be living in a nice home, but that was just his neighbor. His house was dreary and falling apart. He was a creep and poorly dressed and had bad hygiene. Count Olaf is an overall vile man. And coming up to this house, it was very worrisome for the kids. Seeing all those snakes was intimidating. After all, the last relative had an affinity for eyes. Now this one is obsessed with snakes? I'm sure they were having major flashbacks before actually seeing Uncle Monty. The door barely creaking open, only seeing a little bit of the house, but everything felt like the exact opposite of meeting Count Olaf. In this case, everything was lavish and pristine versus the dilapidated household of Count Olaf. Uncle Monty's house was dark too, but that was just the lighting. Everything else was very fancy and elegant. Even his introduction was similar, but opposite. Monty had the 3 hello greeting as well, but his wasn't eerie, it was welcoming and cheerful. It really seems that Dr. Montgomery is the exact opposite of Count Olaf, and I'm sure the children feel very relieved. Immediately we begin with good news. A very stark contrast to how the bad beginning started. Maybe things can be different for the Baudelaire children. They didn't get to live with the caring Justice Strauss, but Dr. Montgomery seems like a genuine good person. At least he has a good first impression. We'll learn more about Uncle Monty next time. Until then, readers, keep on reading.